to see you here in the room today. So delighted that you're joining us virtually. This is two things in one. This is actually an official State Board of Higher Education board meeting. And really we're devoting the meeting to the first of our set of 5 regional hearings, which I'll explain a little bit about in a minute. But since it is an official board meeting, let me ask our Board Chief of Staff, Luba Mian, to take roll.
Dr. Shapira.
Here.
Dr. Bieber.
Here.
Dr. Michael Wade Smith. Here. Ms. Aston. Dr. Allen.
Here.
Ms. Sapor.
Here.
Dr. Laskowski.
Here.
Ms. Shirk.
Here, thank you.
Mr. Warfel. Mr. Eden.
Here.
Dr. Rivera.
Here.
Senator Costa. Dr. Rowe.
Angela Fitter is here for Dr. Rowe as her designee.
Thank you. Ms. Momgen.
Here.
We have quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Let's just start with very, very brief introductions so everybody meets our State Board of Higher Education. I'm Cindy Shapira. I'm chair of the board and really delighted to be here. Let's first, start within the room. Maybe, Mike, if you want to just very briefly introduce yourself, we'll go down the row and then we can go on teams.
Hi, I'm Sean Eden, and I'm a student at Penn State.
Jay Costa, board member, Democratic leader in the Senate of Pennsylvania, representing Pittsburgh and Allegheny County.
Michael Wade Smith, board member and senior vice president and chief of staff here at Penn State.
Thank you. And then if we can go virtually, Dr. Bieber, shall we start with you? And then
Sure,
just
Ian.
keep going.
Okay, sure. Good morning, Ann Bieber, board member and president of Lehigh Carbon Community College.
Kara?
Morning, Carol Momgen, special advisor to Secretary of Labor and Industry, Nancy Walker. Thank you.
Just keep going. Andrea, I'm just calling names randomly because I can't see the screen, but keep going.
No problem. Hello, good morning, everyone. Andrea Shirk, President and CEO of Rock Lidditz. Appreciate being involved in today's discussion.
I'll go. Brenda Allen, President, Lincoln University, board member.
And I'll follow her lead, Peter Schweier, Majority Chair of the House Education Committee.
I'll jump in. Next, Kara Laskowski, Professor of Communication Studies at Shippensburg University and a labor representative here as the Vice President of the Association of Pennsylvania College and State University Faculty in the state system, Vice President for our organization statewide.
Dr. McConnell also is up there.
Hi.
Dr. McConnell, Dr. Rivera, go ahead. Just go ahead.
Thank you. Cheryl McConnell, President of St. Joseph's University and a member of the board.
Good morning, everyone. Pedro Rivera, President of Thaddeus Stevens College and a member of the board, an alumnus of Penn State.
Hi, I'm Angela Fitterer. I'm the Executive Deputy Secretary at the Department of Education, and I'm Dr. Carrie Rose, designee on the board.
Great. I think that's everybody, but I could be wrong. It's, oh, I was have to say it's recorded. Oh, okay, fine. So the next thing I want to do is officially let everybody know that we're recording this session. And we are going to very much appreciate all the feedback that we're going to get. So again, today's meeting is the first in our set of 5 regional hearings on developing a strategic plan for the Commonwealth of strategic plan for higher education for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so we're delighted to welcome all members of the public, the Penn State community, and others who are invested in higher education. First, profusely thank our hosts at Penn State for hosting this hearing. A beautiful location. The inn is fantastic. Your hospitality has been absolutely terrific, and we really thank you in supporting the board in this planning effort. We do have a representative of Penn State, Chief of Staff, and I think Senior Vice President Michael Wade-Smith. Michael, off the cuff, but would you like to offer a few words? Thank you. He needs this.
Those in the room and online, welcome to Penn State. A thank you to Gary Brandeis and our partners at the Nittany Lion Inn. It is newly reopened and beautiful, and we're excited to be able to host you all here today in State College. This used to be on campus. Now it's technically off campus, but really you're on campus. So we're excited you're here in State College and excited to host the State Board for Higher Education for this first conversation around our strategic plan. A reminder that Penn State is Pennsylvania's land-grant university with more than $2.3 billion in funded research, with over 85,000 students across the Commonwealth, and having an impact that is truly unlike any other institution that I have ever seen, read about, or experienced. And we are excited about our ongoing and enduring and centuries-long partnership with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and excited to figure out in partnership with all of the other sectors in higher education how to move higher education in Pennsylvania forward, and excited for everyone in the room and online to engage in that conversation and partnership with us today. So thank you. And we're happy you're here. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And thank you for your partnership. And thanks to President Benaputi as well. So as I said, the format of this meeting is basically going to be a town hall, and we are going to focus on to get your views on how we can strengthen our college and university sector and thereby contribute also to the state's economic and workforce development plans. Dr. Kate Shaw, who is the board's executive director, is going to, and I are going to facilitate this, mostly Kate. I'm going to provide a brief overview of the board and the draft 6 strategic planning goals, and then our discussion will engage as many of you as possible. And we really encourage you, to speak up when we get to that point. We're going to take comments, of course, from people in the room and from people who are attending virtually. So why don't we go ahead and start? We've already started. That's good. Okay, and we have skipped the title slide, right? Okay, so I think I just discussed what we're going to be doing in this hearing. So why don't we move on? Let me only say that we know that there are challenges that we face as well as opportunities. We want to hear your points of view about both, but this is our opportunity to really focus on the future and what we can all create and what would benefit both the different types of post-secondary educational institutions we have in our sector, and as I said, the Commonwealth. So let's move on to the next slide, which is just to kind of explain to you a little bit more of what we're doing. This is part of a broader process of gathering feedback to formulate a strategic plan, and it's going on throughout the Commonwealth. By design, we are engaging as broad a range of stakeholders as we can. We're doing it both in these 5 regional hearings and through a survey instrument that anyone can access through the QR code on signs we have on this room or from our website. And we will share again that information about how to, add your comments on the website. So whatever you say here, don't forget to go to the website too. Please speak up, encourage your colleagues to as well. So not only are we engaging you with your feedback, but we're asking your help in spreading the word so that we get as broad a range of thoughts as possible. So why don't we go on to the next slide? Just very briefly, you all may know, but just to then restate, the board itself, the State Board of Higher Education, was created last year to fill a need in the Commonwealth, which is a body that can help coordinate support for higher education in the Commonwealth. So this is not a new concept. We did not invent state boards of higher education. They exist in many states. Some are extremely successful at what we do. We're hoping we'll be one of those. And it's modeled in large part on the successful boards that do exist in states that coordinate their higher education sectors and that have been able to leverage that kind of coordination and sometimes even collaboration to advance economic prosperity and better serve students and really, all of the residents of whatever state. So we have 21 people who are sitting on this Board of Higher Education. The seats are carefully thought out, again, to embrace stakeholders. We have students, legislators, business leaders. We have labor leaders and representatives from a broad range, I think basically all of the sectors of higher education in the Commonwealth. We also have representation from executive level administrative departments such as Labor and Industry and of course the Department of Education. One thing that we have really established as a culture on the board is we represent different stakeholders, but we all wear, a hat that's toward a common purpose when we sit on the board, which is really to advance higher education and the good that it can do throughout the Commonwealth. So, okay, if we go to the next slide. We're going to hear more from Dr. Shaw, but I think we know that higher education in Pennsylvania and perhaps elsewhere face a number of challenges today. We are not unique, but we really have a very robust higher education sector. We know it's already doing remarkable work in serving our students and our communities. And our thought on the state board is to build on that. It's always been higher education a central component of long-term economic prosperity in the Commonwealth. And now that we are moving toward places where we can align and further that economic prosperity, we're also aligning with related efforts that are going on in the state. And again, we'll talk about that just a little bit more. So let's get to our goals. These are our draft goals. Actually, the slide I have is the steps in the timeline. It's not the goals themselves, right? Yeah, okay, great. So let me do that first. So this basically is the timeline. We have a deadline of September 2025, which is rapidly approaching, to submit our plan. It's a statutory deadline for adoption of this strategic plan. And so working backwards from that, we started really at the beginning of this year, even a little bit earlier, in developing the draft goals that we'll get to. The board actually took an official board action to approve the draft goals, understanding that they are draft, and that's the purpose, right, of these hearings, is to validate change, add whatever we hear and can incorporate. But really this period of time in the spring is devoted to collecting public opinion, as we said, from these hearings and also online on the website. And so by summer, we will have a draft plan that will be again posted for public comment, and we will hold one final hearing this summer, which will be in Harrisburg, and that will be to get comment and feedback on the draft plan itself. So it's a short but intense timeline, but I will also say it's not like all of us haven't been thinking about this for a long time, right? And I think we sort of have a general understanding, right, of where we would like to be going. So we do have, I think of this as building on as much as it is starting from scratch. Okay, let's see. Here are now, yeah, you're on the net, great. Here are the draft strategic plans that were approved by the state board. And you can see them, obviously, as we proceed through this hearing, we're going to do it goal by goal. So you'll get into it more. But essentially, we found that the most important things that we need to focus on in this plan is increasing post-secondary credential attainment. We need more people with more post-secondary degrees for today's economic and workforce sectors. How do we do that? Well, we have to ensure that we have affordable pathways, right, for people to attain those credentials. The workforce, is a piece of it, and the piece that, of course, drives what the workforce will look like is the economic development needs of the Commonwealth. So we're concerned with that part of the equation as well. So 3 and 4, sort of go together, and they're also two sides of an equation. Number 5, ensure accountability and efficient use of state funds. This is very much in everybody's interest, and we want the state board to be able to help achieve that goal, which is so important, not just on the face of it, but also it underlies, and it's the foundation as well, for our value proposition to the Commonwealth and for the value proposition of higher education altogether in the public eye. And then number 6, we want to strengthen the health and the stability of the higher education sector. There is increasing instability, as we all know. I'm also involved with PASHE, so I'm very well aware of it as well, from that point of view. And to the extent possible that this board can set that out as a goal and help make that part of what it does, that's extremely important too, because without a healthy and stable, financially healthy and stable higher education sector, none of the rest of this can happen. Okay, so I'm going to switch to Kate in a minute. Again, let me thank everybody here for supporting the work of creating a vision and a set of strategies that will be real and will be really implemented for higher education in Pennsylvania. So Kate, I think it's your turn.
Yeah. Thank you, Cindy, and thanks everybody for coming. I'm going to walk around a little because I'm kind of excited about this phase of our work together. So I know that all of us here are concerned about higher education, and I also know that if anybody's reading the newspaper, we know that there's a lot of instability happening both at the federal level and also at the state level. And to my mind, that means that there is no better time, and it has never been more urgent for us to come together and figure out together where our higher education sector should go and how it should contribute to the well-being of the people of Pennsylvania, our communities, and the Commonwealth's economy. And so that's what this process is about. The board blessed us with some draft strategic plan goals. And our goal here is to get concrete feedback about how we are going to reach those goals. And in particular, we're doing these meetings on a regional basis because we know that the kind of feedback that we might get from somebody who lives in, say, southeastern Pennsylvania, that has a, an incredible richness of institutions, might be a little different than, what somebody might say in another part of the Commonwealth, where there might not be as many higher education institutions, or maybe we have shrinking demographics or different kinds of employment sectors. And so it's really important for us to be thinking statewide, but also for you all to give us feedback on, is there anything in particular about the central region of this state that we need to know and think about when we're thinking about strategies that might help us reach these goals? And so I am going to go through each goal individually. I'll put the goal up. I'll give you some information and data to kind of help contextualize the goal and help explain a little bit about why we think the board thinks it's so important that we focus on the goal. And then I'm going to ask you for your feedback. And we really want honest feedback. We're going to focus. We're going to try to be forward focusing. We're going to try to focus on strategies to help address these goals. If we talk about barriers or problems, I want to also talk about your ideas about solutions. So we see this as a generative conversation. It's an exciting time for us because we together get to imagine what higher education is going to be in the Commonwealth. Okay, here's our first goal. Increase post-secondary credential attainment. And there's a rationale to that. And the rationale is that we need to equip more people with high quality credentials and mitigate disparities in attainment that exist. And I'll show you some of the ways in which we vary in the ways in which people, the degree to which people are getting credentials. But when we say credential, I want to be really clear here. We're not just talking about 2- and 4-year degrees. We're talking about credentials obtained by a post-secondary institution that could be as short as 1 year or maybe less, all the way up through graduate level work that people are seeking. And they may be seeking a credential for many reasons. And they may decide that they're going to start with a short-term credential and then over the course of their lifetime continue to build. So credential attainment is really important. And there's some data I want to show you about this. If I can get this to work. There we go. This is a really important slide because on average, well, compared to other states, our college attainment level is about average. About 46% of our state has some kind of a degree. I think that this particular statistic, which we got nationally, may not include people with shorter term credentials, but I think the larger point is we're about average. But then you start to look at how things vary by county. And what you see is the green parts of this slide are areas where we have much higher than average attainment rates. Notice that green spot in the middle of the state. That is because Penn State is here, and Penn State is producing a very large number of credentials every year. So on average, you see that this part of the state has high credential attainment levels, and you also see it in the Southeast, and you see it over in the Pittsburgh area. But then you see other parts of the state where we're well below average in terms of credential attainment. And that's concerning, right? It isn't that I think anybody would argue that everybody needs to go to college, but we do want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to get the kind of credential that they're seeking. And we see variation in this. I also want to point this out, that over the last 10 years, we have seen pretty dramatic drops in college enrollment across all of our post-secondary sectors. I also want to point out there's variation within these, but overall, this is what we're seeing. So we see relatively minor drops from main campus of state-related, like Penn State, Pitt, Temple, and Lincoln. We see, little under 13% drop in the independent sector, independent colleges and universities. When you look at branch campuses of our state-related institutions, you see a more significant drop, and that's branch campuses of both Penn State and Pitt. We see, almost a 31% drop on PASHE campuses, our state-owned university system, and about 36% among community college students. I will say, I think that the arrow that indicates the drop in community college students is not picking up on students that are not seeking for-credit credentials and degrees. And so I do think it's probably not quite like that, because what we're seeing our community colleges doing is increasingly aligning with, workforce needs. But this right here is an area of concern for us. It's pretty substantial. It's not unusual. We see this in other states as well, but it's part of the context I want everybody to have. I'm just going to touch on the fact that we've got demographic declines across the Commonwealth. We see an adult population that's projected to decline 5.3%. We do have 1 million Pennsylvanians that have some college but no degree. So that's really interesting for us. Those are adults. And then, whoops, sorry. We see these demographic trends that everybody's talking about. The number of high school graduates is going to begin to drop. And by 2037, they're going to drop by 12%. So that means the number of traditionally aged college students is also going to drop. And that is causing a lot of concern. I just want to give you this rudimentary map of all the post-secondary institutions in the central region that we're focusing on today. And one of the thing I want to point out here is that you see concentrations of institutions in specific parts of this region, and then you see other parts of the region that really don't have any higher education institutions. Again, if we're talking about increasing attainment levels, this is something we want to think about. Does everybody have access to a college or university? Okay, technology is the bane of my existence. Okay, so now I'm going to turn to the conversation part. And I have these questions up here. These are just prompt questions, but they're really designed to get people talking. What stood out to you when you looked at the data that I just put up in front of you?
those kinds of attainments
Mhm.
and how they're connected to job placements. So we could talk more about this later, but I always think it's important to be able to show that there should be coordination and a connection to the local workforce system and statewide.
Thank you. So that sounds like a straight up strategy. Create better connections between our higher education sector and our workforce sector, make things more transparent, but also, as you pointed out, you noted that there are resources available. And how do we work to make sure that those resources are, that people understand what they are and how they might draw them down? Okay. Anybody else in the room that wants to make a comment or make a suggestion? Okay, Allie, I'm going to turn to the remote people who might have their hands up.
Great, yeah. So if you are joining remotely and you wish to speak, you can raise your hand electronically. And if you're on the phone line and you wish to speak, you can also press *5 and we will allow you to unmute. So invite folks who have called in remotely. Apologies, we had a little bit of a disconnection, but we're back up now. So if you would like to respond or offer your feedback to this goal 1, please raise your hand. And if you're on the phone, again, you can raise your hand by pressing *5. Give folks a moment, Kate, but I don't see any hands so far.
Okay. Oh, now you do.
All right, sure do. Very good. Okay, Michelle. Michelle Moore, and you should be able to unmute. You may need to press *6.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. My name is Dr. Michelle Moore, and I'm the executive director of the Potter County Education Council. So we're about 2 counties north of where you are right now. And I just wanted to mention that there are 9 community education councils across the Commonwealth. We classes through those partnerships, whether they're workforce development classes for things like real estate certifications. We've brought in credit-bearing courses, non-credit courses, and so on. And just it appears since COVID that a lot of the post-secondary education institutions have really gone on to the online or hybrid type of offerings. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is that there is about the CECs, the Community Education Councils, we service about 11% of the state's population. And we cover about 28% of the state's geography. And with that, within our footprints, we have households with about 40% higher rates of not having internet. So that's making online education and training opportunities much more difficult to access in our areas. What I'm just wanting to suggest is to have the higher education institutions really take a look at partnering with community education councils and other types of organizations to be able to bring in and offer in-person opportunities, those courses, those credentials for people in our areas, because a lot of us, like you were mentioning before, don't have a brick and mortar institution of higher ed in our backyards.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That's really important feedback and a good suggestion.
Thank you.
Do we have any other folks? Okay.
This time.
Great. I'm going to move on to the second goal. If I can. There you go. This is about affordability and ensuring affordable pathways to post-secondary credentials. This is a big issue in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as I know everybody knows. It's actually an issue all over the country. But when we think about affordability, there's lots of different ways to think about it, right? We can think about debt levels. We can think about tuition and fees, true cost of attendance, which has to do with, you know, the full cost of deciding to go to college. And we may also think about things like financial aid. So this is a big bucket issue for us. I want to show you a few pieces of information. Okay. The most recent national analysis of affordability in the country says that we are the 49th, we are 49th out of 50 in terms of affordability. So this is a major issue for us, of course, in Pennsylvania. And the average student that graduates from college has $40,000 in debt. That's the average student. And those are only the students that actually graduate. We are not counting people who don't graduate. That's a high debt level. So our students are taking on debt. Again, this is not unique to Pennsylvania, although it's pretty severe in Pennsylvania. So it's something I think we've been thinking about how to address for a long time. Whoops. Here's another piece of information. These pieces of information also kind of lead into this, right? Because we think they might be related to the question of affordability. We've got these students, 1.1 million people in Pennsylvania who started college and never finished. We've got a drop of 7% of high school graduates who are electing to go to college right out of high school. So not only are our demographics going down in terms of the number of high school graduates, the percentage of that smaller number is dropping who go to college right after high school. And when national studies show that 38% of high school graduates who don't go to college basically say that it's because of cost and debt. So we know we have a problem. This is pretty common sense. I don't think anybody would dispute that we've got a problem in this space. And the question is, how are we going to, what strategies would we need to employ to begin to address this? So same set of questions. What are you thinking about when you think about what we know? And I gave you statistics. Many of you know this in a more personal way. You work directly with students, or you have family members that talk about this. What do you think are the most important elements of affordability in Pennsylvania? What are the biggest concerns? And what strategies should we use to begin to address the question of affordability, knowing that not only can we consider things that might happen at the college level, we might also consider other policies that might begin in high school to help high school students start accumulating college credits, or to strengthen transfer from one institution to another, so that students don't pay a quote unquote transfer tax when they move from one institution to another. So with that, I'll be quiet, and I would love to hear your feedback in this space.
Good morning. My name is Linda Fedrizzi Williams. I'm the president of Central Penn College, also in Cumberland County, right across the river from Harrisburg. And affordability is by far the #1 barrier for our students. I can't help but be struck by the first slide that you showed today about the statistics of students. The number of students that are dropping from the most affordable colleges, the community colleges, the state institutions, some of the career and technical. The institutions that cost a lot more are not having the same challenges, and part of it is our student demographic. So at Central Penn, 65% of our students have taken college credits somewhere else. So by the time they get to us, they have exhausted a lot of their financial aid. And so they know starting that by the time they hit their senior year or their last semester, they're going to have to pay out of pocket. And so institutions that are small like us have to pay a lot in scholarship dollars just to help these students, but it's a major challenge. And I don't know if there's something we could look at in the way that aid is distributed, or grants for students, or more completion grants for students, because I'm betting that 1.1 million ran out of money of the students that aren't going back into higher ed. So this might be the biggest barrier for Pennsylvanians.
So it sounds like your strategy suggestion is to really hone in on financial aid, and in particular, how we distribute financial aid. Okay. Thank you for that. What else in this room? Who else in this room? Oh, in the back again.
And I invite those online, remote, to raise your hand, and we'll get to you in a moment.
I would encourage that we come up with a statewide strategy to really work with K-12 to ensure that students make, if not the right choice, a better choice the first time whenever they graduate and go off and try something. College of any kind is a costly guesswork game. And so the better we can do with advisement, the better we can do with workforce data and the needs of our like local and regional areas for students. And like, hey, you can go to this institution, get this credential. Here are the jobs that are available nearby. I think would be really helpful. And school counselors, there are over 5,000 school counselors in our schools across Pennsylvania. So we have a workforce that does this kind of work already, but helping streamline it to some strategic goals that we actually attempt to achieve instead of just kind of hoping it all works out and letting the kids just kind of guesswork their way through, I think would be really valuable. And so partnering with K-12 and specifically creating some structure and information sharing to make sure students and schools can deliver that information to them without needing to go to like the Department of Labor and Industry website and like look through the statistics or spreadsheets that students probably aren't accessing. And there's already a lot of good information out there, but as far as like a strategic approach to that, I think that would be something this would have a lot of potential to do good in.
Right. And I so appreciate the high school counselors that exist, but I also know that your counselor to student ratio is insanely high, even in the best resourced school districts in the state. And so I hear you when you say you need help. Like you cannot by yourself be tracking down all this information for every one of the students that you counsel. So many states have these really great websites that really help students and families navigate that very question. If I want to be if I want this kind of job, here's my credential pathway. And here are the institutions that offer those credentials. So we have some good examples of how to do that. And I appreciate that you are suggesting that. Look in the back, right there.
Good morning. My name is Andrew Barnett. I'm a dean at Westmoreland County Community College, a little outside of the central region, but it was an easy drive for us. And thanks for hosting us today. Dual enrollment has become a strategy for families to reduce the cost of higher education. But in my experience with it, it remains a question of access by socioeconomic status, by school district and by families' income, right? And so I think a strategy would be for Pennsylvania to start considering ways to help fund it for families because it's just creating more bifurcation by SES.
Thank you for saying that. I think that's a great suggestion. And I want you to know under the leadership of our Deputy Secretary for Higher Ed, Lynette Kuhn, we are driving out dual credit dollars designed in large part to address exactly what you're talking about, which is making sure that students who otherwise might not go to college or might face barriers actually get a taste of college through dual credit. So there's a lot of work to do in that space, but pardon me? There you go. I hope you get it. Oop, there's a question in the back.
Last call for remote attendees as well for goal 2. We look forward to seeing any hands.
Thank you. So admittedly, it's been a minute since I've been in college, but I think that's also important as kids are moving forward into either wherever they're going, we need to teach them and understand the financial aspect of it, that we teach them, you know, when they go into a cafeteria and they're met with a credit card company, that paying the minimum has a long-term effect of whatever they charge. So I think we need to let them understand of what it's going to cost for them to go to college and understand the pay of what that's going to look like and how to see, you know, you might not come out with a job that's going to get you. So you have to tie it back to the workforce component that we are working with our workforce groups. You know, we have workforce solutions in North Central Pennsylvania. The WIB works very closely with our companies and making sure that the education is what the companies are looking for and that those soft skills are also taught. And part of that is the financial aspects of managing money.
Thank you very much for that. I know that our colleagues at PDE in the K-12 space are very much engaged in exactly that kind of stuff, financial literacy, because I think when somebody thinks, you know, oh, I'll be $50,000 in debt, they don't know what that means on a month-to-month basis. They don't know that means they're not going to be able to buy a car, or they're not going to be able, yeah. Thank you for that. Is there time for one? Okay, so there's no remote questions? Okay. All right, so thank you for all that feedback, and I am going to move on to goal 3. There we go. Now we're talking about economic development. So there's a lot of rationale there. And it's important, I think, to distinguish, as Cindy said earlier, economic development and workforce development are integrally connected. But what the board decided to do here is to call out specifically economic development. And we're defining that as, or post-secondary's contribution to economic development is to increase the ability of our post-secondary institutions to create, attract, and retain high-paying employers in industry. So research, innovation, creating the credential pipeline that we need today, but also tomorrow, looking into the future, thinking about what kinds of jobs and what kind of economy are we aiming for, and making sure there's that talent base. That's how we think about higher education and economic development. And this is a critical element in this current administration. So I want to put up a few slides about that. So the Department of Community and Economic Development adopted a 10-year strategic plan that highlights the role of higher education in achieving this plan. And it specifically says that we should build the foundation for a strong, effective, and efficient system of higher education, that we should reinvest in higher education responsibly, and that we should make college more affordable. So this is really important because that document ties explicitly together the health of our higher education sector with the long-term economic prosperity of the Commonwealth. There's additional things in that strategic plan, like, and things that you hear Governor Shapiro talking about all the time. And he says things like, government's working at the speed of business and opening doors of opportunity for Pennsylvanians, whatever kinds of opportunities they're seeking, innovating to win. In other words, creating incentivizing innovation here so that companies want to come in. And so faculty that are innovating keep their innovations here as they start up companies. Governor Shapiro continues to prioritize economic development, and all you need to do is watch his social media feed and watch what he does across the Commonwealth, and you see over and over his kind of common sense approach to making sure that we are creating a prosperous Pennsylvania. So that's exciting because it's really aligned with strengthening our higher education sector. One of the things we know when we look at what's happening in other states is that states that do the best in economic development and in creating a good environment for employers, they do a lot of things. I don't list all of them, but these are the things that are related to us. They overall have a high level of post-secondary attainment. So it's a state that has a lot of talent that has been developed and credentialed. The skills and the talent that the state has are aligned not just to today's economy, but to the economy that we're trying to build. That the higher education ecosystem itself is responsive to the needs of current and future businesses, so that if we don't have the talent, our higher education institutions are able to step up and be able to say in a coordinated way, we can get you there, we can work with you to develop the talent, the credentials, and the skills that we actually need. Incentives to innovate, for higher education institutions to innovate, and again, a strong alignment between our sector, our post-secondary sector, and the economic development efforts of the Commonwealth. So these are kind of best practices in our space. If what we're trying to do is to strengthen economic development in higher education by strengthening economic development in the Commonwealth by strengthening higher education. Same set of questions. What is most important to you as you think about economic development in Pennsylvania and how our sector might contribute to it? Are there things we should be thinking about that we're not already thinking about? What are some of the problems you might see? And then how might you suggest that we address them? So with that, once again, I'm going to open it up for our in-person attendees to see if you've got any contributions in terms of strategies you think we should be employing to meet this particular goal. I also want to say, board members, if you have things to say, please contribute. I'm sorry that I didn't say that before, but you all come with particular perspectives that are important as well.
Good morning. Is this one?
Yes.
Lanier Alum, Susquehanna Valley Community Education Project. I think one of the pieces that when we compare to other states that we're missing is the integration of our community colleges and the more proliferant community colleges across the Commonwealth that can contribute in this way to workforce development and thereby economic development.
So could you just say a little bit more so that so that strategy would be?
That strategy would be to, number one, have more community colleges, especially in the desert areas of the Commonwealth. And number two, to increase budget line item for community colleges because they are producing that entry-level workforce that we need. And then once they are at a point where they can be transitioned into four-year institutions, that's when, you know, they can become even more dynamic in the economic development of the state.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. So I'll again speak for rural Pennsylvania. I think there's opportunities again to use your branch campuses a little bit more effectively. We are an economic development tech hub. We have a large powdered metal press materials industry that is trying to position themselves as industry 4.0. It's sort of like broadband. By the time they get to industry 4.0, we're going to be at 6.0. We've got to find a way to incentivize our educational systems to get them to come back into rural communities to support the workforce of manufacturing in these high-tech fields. And, you know, maybe it's grant forgiveness to have people locate into rural areas to do that, or to use your branch campuses as actual research facilities to support the local industry versus the research always being done in XYZ main campuses or Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. Get them in there so they can do research for that local niche market and understand the benefit of the workforce and the economic component that's integrated from workforce to education to the employees spending their resources in rural communities.
Thank you for that. And you are consistently pointing out the importance of what we sometimes call place-based strategies, right? That we can't, as big as this state is, and as diverse as the state is in terms of economies and demographics, we need to both be thinking at the state level, but also know that some of the most important strategies are going to have to be tailored, you know, to the particularities of particular, you know, areas of the Commonwealth. So I appreciate that. Michael, one of our board members, is going to speak now.
So Kate, as I was listening to you, as you were sort of shaping what we're trying to do with this particular goal, I guess a question to you, based on what you know now and your team, do you think we've sufficiently connect the needs of specific businesses locally with what their skill set needs are? Let me offer you a specific example. Sure. Some of you may know I serve as the chairman of one of the state universities. I had dinner with one of the largest employers in Lancaster County earlier this week. He has like 3,000 employees. They're one of the largest independent labs in the world. So they're a global company. We at Millersville supply a lot of the STEM graduates that he needs to do the things that are necessary. But one of the things I appreciate, Chairperson Shapira, is that, you know, in addition to folks here who represent a wide swath of the Commonwealth, we also have the various departments within the Shapiro administration who can lean in and inform us as we move. So what I'm wondering, and this is, sorry, give me, what I'm trying to figure out is, do we know what the needs are by companies who are engaged with perhaps the state economic development authorities or community development, et cetera? I mean, I know we have an investment by Glaxo in northern Lancaster County. $800 million is coming. And I know the Shapiro administration is interested in, and they're supplying some funds to build a new manufacturing facility for pharmaceutical. So I'm just curious, is that connection already there? And if not, that's something we have to figure out. Do we work with the local chambers? I'm not sure, but I think that's something I think we need to think about to match the needs with the local communities, with the local institutions, whether it's a community college, it's Penn State, it's a state university. All of us have skill sets that can lend and lean in to provide that unique talent. And it may be specific talent, actually working with faculty at a local institution to actually create the content necessary to inform and educate a specific workforce. I think that's what it's going to take for us to be globally competitive, right? So sorry for the long-winded
That's
question.
a great question. And I know that our colleague from L&I probably has something to say about that. But I think more broadly, what you're pointing to is often what happens in this Commonwealth and other places is that there's a lot of information, but it's not connected or it's not getting to the right people. And that could be a challenge. That could be part of a strategy that we would want to propose.
Thank you. To Michael's question and point, I serve as the treasurer for the Allegheny County Community College. And I can tell you from our perspective, and I think Dr. Cindy knows this very well, we have a strong connection with our Allegheny Conference, our Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce with respect to what the needs of the region are. Very well connected in its leadership. I think it's a leadership of Dr. Bullock, who really makes certain that we have these conversations to the point where last year we just opened a $70 million workforce training center that provides the flexibility to meet the needs of the businesses in our region. And I think so it exists. It sounds like it doesn't exist in places that it needs to exist, but I do think that's something that's worthy of, pursuing and being part of this dialogue and this conversation.
So Senator Costa, I think you pointed out a couple of really important things. One is that we have remarkable work going on between individual colleges and universities and our workforce and economic development efforts. Many strong examples. Our challenge in Pennsylvania is how do you scale that? How do you make sure that everybody across the Commonwealth is sort of, engaging in the kind of best practices that we're already seeing from many of our institutions? And that's one of the roles of the State Board of Higher Education, not to make that happen, but to identify what are the strategies, what are the policies that would incentivize the kinds of collaborations that we already see in many areas, and make sure that everybody has the capacity to make those connections and to sort of strengthen that, workforce, economic development, higher education connection. Because we're not starting from ground zero, but we're very decentralized and unorganized. And that's part of the reason the State Board of Higher Education is so important, because we're trying to kind of just get things organized a little bit and provide a way for institutions and sectors to collaborate. So I appreciate that comment.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Megan Beck. I've been involved with the Susquehanna Valley Community Education Project with Lanier and others. I've only been involved about 10 years. She's been involved about 18 years. Hopefully that just sort of tells you how hard it is to get a community college launched in Pennsylvania. I would say that is one of the biggest weaknesses of our state in education. It's really a shame because they are that key piece that is the short-term education that is flexible and adaptable, for 2-year or less education. We have amazing four-year institutions, but they aren't necessarily geographically accessible to those students and the demographics we're trying to reach to bring into workforce development. If there is anything I can beg for you to do, and that is to somehow improve the system of community colleges in Pennsylvania. Lanier mentioned the desert. Basically, the entire northern tier of Pennsylvania down through central Pennsylvania doesn't have access to community colleges. Luzerne is the one, like rural northeastern Pennsylvania community college. Erie County Community College, after an 18-year struggle, launched a few years ago. Definitely check out their website. You can see all their successes they've even had in just a couple years. They have wait lists. It is phenomenal. It's doing what it needs to do for economic development, and we'd love to see that more across the state. We're trying to do that in the Susquehanna Valley, and it has been a hard slog. Just a brief history lesson, the way community colleges have to be established is that you need a grassroots effort, you need finances, and you need political will from the local level, which is a wonderful thing in Pennsylvania. I love Pennsylvania and that we do these things that way, but it's created a huge barrier. So if there's anything that you can do, it would be much appreciated.
Thank you for that.
So to get to the board's question here, I think there is a connection to the employers. It's called the Partner for Regional Economic Performance, and DCD and the senator would be aware of that program that really works at bringing workforce and economic development folks into and doing engaged surveys with the employers to understand what it is they need, and then bringing that back to education. I think the education piece may be missing, but there is a network across the entire Commonwealth called the PrEP network that does integrate directly workforce and employment to tie that. So it's just, how do you integrate education into that existing model that works really well?
Thank you for that. Are there any questions from our virtual participants? Oh, there's one more comment.
Not yet, but I invite our remote attendees to raise your hand.
This builds off the initial question too. And in Pennsylvania, one of our priorities at Labor and Industry and across many of the agencies is cross-agency collaboration. And so the way we look at doing that is through a whole host of different ways. But through the Pennsylvania Workforce Development Board, there is a lot of business that is represented there. And the board itself across the state works with each agency to make recommendations to the governor. Many of those things are around credential attainment. Many of those things are around growing or emerging businesses and what their needs are. Innovation that's coming into Pennsylvania and how we can take advantage of that through our economic development opportunities and resources. So to the point about Glaxo, right? So working with DCED, we know that there's going to be 200 jobs. And so understanding through the state board, state industry partnerships, which are partnerships of consortiums of companies within specific sectors and subsectors, what their hiring needs are, what their education needs are, what their educational attainment needs are, not only to get into a position, but maintain their position, grow along a career ladder, and then be retained. It's so important that we coordinate these because there is a lot of connection to industry. There is a lot of connection to employers. There are business education partnerships throughout the state that have a whole host of different organizations involved. So as much as we can learn about the innovative companies, the growing or emerging companies that economic development is looking to attract in PA, and then connect them to the workforce needs that they have.
Agreed. That's a great suggestion and strategy. Thank you so much.
Attendee Carrie Aman, you should be able to press *6 and make your comment, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Hi. Hi, good morning or afternoon. Just to piggyback on some of the comments, employer engagement is incredibly challenging. We know oftentimes when employers identify they have a workforce need, they needed it about 6 months ago. And so I would highlight that there is some evidence-based practices, and some of the commenters are raising some valid points around connections and existing state level programming. This type of work, like employers trust local relationships. And so there's some relationship building that needs to happen. I would say to survey the existing landscape of where some of those connection points are happening already. I think the challenge with that sometimes is we can talk about GlaxoSmithKline, we can talk about the big ticket count of jobs. Most employers are going to be small employers in the state of Pennsylvania that don't have the human resource needs to really map out skills and competencies that align with credentials or even workforce readiness activities. So I would say this intersection's a key one. There's some existing programming that's available made by state, by local workforce programs, by economic development prep activities. I think it's the right focus. The solution has to be something that is efficient, timely, and impactful for the employer. And so that working at the speed of business is something that will typically challenge our government funded and designed programming. So I will just throw that out there as some things to think about. And thanks for giving me the time to highlight a remark.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks so much. Next attendee online, Jacob Allen Marsh. You should be able to unmute by pressing *6.
Thank you for this time. My name's Jake Marsh. I'm at Penn State. I'm actually at Barron in Erie, but I think this is pretty universal for all of us. I can't express how valuable it is being able to do projects with industry, and not just the large scale projects, and not just large industry, but particularly small to medium sized businesses. We do a lot of work with manufacturers up here. It lowers risk for them in a way that is extraordinary and enables them to experiment with technologies they've never used before, It enables them to build relationships with our universities. I'd also like to express that it gives tremendous value to the students. So the students, while they're working on these projects, get practical experience doing it before they even graduate. And I don't just mean graduate students. Some people think this is work just for graduates. It's for undergraduates as well. They're very capable of doing it. They do excellent work. They build relationships with potential employers for their careers, and they lower risk across the board. The return on investment of this sort of work is just extraordinary. So I'd encourage any opportunity that you have when you're thinking about this to broaden that out to as many communities as possible. So I understand most large funding opportunities go to Pittsburgh and Philly, but most of the struggling medium-sized businesses are outside of those areas. Any opportunity to fund projects that, or to pave the way for projects that put undergraduates working on lowering risk for technology with industry, just the return on that investment is extraordinary every time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. So great suggestion. Okay, we are moving on to goal 4.
Can we, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to jump in if I could.
Oh, please do,
just
Cindy.
before we move on. So I was out, meeting with a reporter. So forgive me if this has already been mentioned because I don't know. But I would just suggest, if we haven't talked about the important role of our R1 institutions, around this goal and around this strategic plan. There is a role for them. I believe, I talked a little bit about this at the beginning, the two sides of the equation. You have to develop and you have to be innovative and do the research, et cetera, to develop the industries, to create new jobs, et cetera. And then, of course, you have to build the workforce to fulfill that. And I think we've talked a lot about that part of the equation. I just want to make sure we mention the other side of the equation, which to me could be a strong role for our Research One institutions. Not that I'm thinking about it because I'm sitting here at Penn State and, staring at Michael, but, perhaps that made the thought come to mind. So I just want to, sort of throw that out there as we're talking about both this goal and the strategies that would help meet it, to be thinking about the role of the R1s.
Thank you, Cindy. We hadn't talked about that. So that's a new contribution. Okay. Are we good to go on to 4? Okay. Oh, hold up. Goal 4. Support the workforce development needs of the Commonwealth. Related. A lot of what you've said actually relates to this goal, as well as the previous economic development goal. So what we're doing here is just making a distinction that's a little bit gray, but still important. And we're defining workforce development needs as the credentials and skills that we need right now to fill jobs, and that we would need in the future if we presume no major disruption in the economy or in the kinds of businesses that will be driving our economy. And it's important to note here that we're not just talking about narrow credentials, because one of the things we know when employers talk to higher education is that they're looking for what some people call soft skills or essential skills, core skills. And that's the critical thinking, the ability to innovate, the ability to adjust and be flexible. Many, many employers are looking for that, as well as any kind of technical credentials or skills. And so when we're talking about the workforce development needs of the Commonwealth, we're not just talking about this particular narrow credential that fits this particular job, because there's a whole set of skills that make for a successful person in the workforce. So I just wanted to say that. So I've got some data. There you go. So last year we did some analysis to try to understand what we're calling the statewide workforce. We call it a post-secondary credential gap. And that's really the analysis is how many jobs can we not fill because we're not producing the post-secondary credentials that would be needed to fill them. And anytime you do this kind of analysis, it's probably not exact, but it's good to kind of get a general sense. And what this analysis revealed is that over 60,000 jobs in the Commonwealth can't be filled by people that we produce in our colleges and universities because we're not producing the credentials that would align to them. And that's an important credential. It's something that the governor, I know, was really concerned about last year when he was out talking about higher education reform. One of the interesting things, though, is, of course, that these gaps are not, uniform across our Commonwealth. And you see that the biggest gap is in the southeastern part of the state. And then you see some of our, less populated regions of the state have smaller gaps. It doesn't mean that they're not critical, just means that, there's fewer people working in fewer, sort of businesses overall. The central part of Pennsylvania, which is what we're focused on right now, has a relatively small gap, but that might be, at least in part, because Penn State is in this region, and Penn State is producing a lot of bachelor's degrees and graduate degrees, but not everybody that goes to Penn State stays in the central region. So that number might be a little bit lower than what the real challenge is, but I just wanted to point that out, that we have quite a lot of variation. This is one of the reasons why it's so important to be having these regional meetings. So if we don't do anything about this, this gap is going to keep growing pretty dramatically. And this is going to challenge our current employers, and is also going to be a red flag for any future employers that want to come into this Commonwealth. Because while talent and credentials are not the only thing that new businesses or existing businesses are thinking about, it's a necessary condition for these employers who are looking for the kinds of skills and talents that post-secondary credentials produce. We got to do a better job at that. But again, if we can look at a little bit more granular detail, again, this is not like a precise analysis. So this is in the central region. One of the things that sticks out to me here is that the biggest gap is associates and certificates. That when that analysis was conducted, we're slightly overproducing bachelor's degrees. Again, that's because Penn State is so large and it's producing a lot of bachelor's degrees. Whether or not those folks stay is a different question, but that's one of the reasons why it looks like we don't need any more bachelor's degrees in this region. But the associate level and certificate level credentials that employers in the central region are looking for, we're not doing a good enough job producing those. So that's like such interesting and strong and important concrete information, because it helps us think about how we might address that problem. Whoops, hold up. Can we go back? There we go. Another thing to just look at, and this is just a few areas, but we see the largest number of job openings that are not currently filled in healthcare, registered nurses, and licensed practical and vocational nurses. In particular, this shouldn't be a surprise. We've got a huge shortage all over the Commonwealth and really all over the country. Education, something near and dear to my heart. Teaching assistants, preschool teachers, etc. Lots of those. And then some of these more sort of like trade and maintenance areas, general maintenance, automotive service technicians, all of which require some kind of training, typically obtained beyond high school. So there's more granular data than that that's available, but it's helpful, again, to think about if we were going to develop a strategy for meeting the workforce post-secondary credential needs in this region, this kind of data that we have, from labor and industry and other sources can really help us target and help our higher education institutions align to the workforce needs of the region. So I think it's really useful, and I wanted to put that up for you as an example of how we can use data and information to help customize how we might address workforce needs in a particular region. All right, so I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to ask for your input on strategies that we might use to address this particular goal.
I know a lot of institutions do this individually, but one of the best ways that we're able to meet workforce needs and then also help the economy is when the businesses help pay for the students' tuition. And I know that's easy to say for larger businesses, but what I'm getting at is if there is an incentive for them, whether it's a tax incentive, if there's grant money, if we could do something through DCED, because these same people that work for them are working full time. And it's going to take them forever even to get a certificate, even if they're doing it accelerated. So if businesses had level of incentive and then they're paying tuition, and I'll say this too, businesses won't like this, but our most successful is with the giant company. They give their students release time once a week to actually take their classes, even if the classes are online. So on Fridays from 8 to noon, the company is granting their employees time to work on their studies. And it sounds like you'd be losing productivity, but you don't. And then those people are loyal to the company. So if businesses had some level of incentive for payment and then actual time, because the barriers of the internet that we were talking about at some places, they actually give them a workspace in their organization. So there are innovative things that can be done if they're getting some sort of incentive.
Thank you. That's a great concrete example of how we might figure out ways to incentivize the employment sector to sort of help overcome that gap. Where did?
Reminder to online attendees to raise your hand if you'd like to chime in.
No, you can go though. Go ahead.
There's so much to say. So your point is well made. Providing employers with incentives and information about what's available to them and making sure that that's available widely so that even the post-secondary institutions understand it and know about it. So for employers specifically, there are a host of different kinds of resources through the workforce system. They can receive on-the-job training funds. They can receive money for their incumbent workers. And so lots of times those particular resources connect back to post-secondary institutions that are providing that training and availability to them. So understanding what the needs are within particular employers, but in sectors overall, because a lot of time they're transferable, making those connections makes a lot of sense.
Again, figuring out how to make sure people have institutions, sectors have the information they need to make strong choices, I think is like a recurrent theme I keep hearing in this meeting.
Just one more thing. If we're thinking about the governor's priorities, we know that healthcare is one of them.
Yes.
We know that teachers are one of them, a whole host of different direct care workers. And so piggybacking on that and looking at what are the post-secondary opportunities to help fill some of those positions, and also looking at what the barriers are to employment, because there are opportunities at the post-secondary level for childcare, right? And by that, I mean growing the childcare workforce, identifying opportunities for career ladders. That's a particular barrier for individuals, but also employers in being able to keep and retain their employees. So identifying industries that we can help grow through post-secondary education that support not only the particular technical job an employer might be hiring for, but those that support it overall.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. So obviously, you know, there's certainly the healthcare, and you talked about the gaps that are there with healthcare and registered nurses, and we have numerous hospital consolidations and closing, and that's a national issue that we're dealing with. But I'm curious of how we are positioning our students and our future workforce to deal with the automation and AI-driven economy that we're leading to so rapidly. Are we positioning people to come out with certificate degrees? We have 3D printers that are all over the place, and they're the nice new shiny toy that everyone has to go buy, but there's no one to fix them when they go bad. Positioning ourselves as a Commonwealth to have students ready for what this AI-driven economy is going to look like.
So it sounds like a strategy might be to try to make that happen, to take into consideration what's coming in the future due to AI, and to ensure that we're not creating credentials that are going to be outmoded in a couple years. Yeah. Okay.
And just, I want to echo that because I think when you introduced this goal, you said, barring any like major changes to the workforce or something like that, and that AI is an incredibly disruptive force in the workforce. It's good. It's very exciting. There's so much potential. And so back to the R1 institutions piece, like how are we leveraging higher ed to be ready for that? And not just ready for because it's here already, but how are we finding opportunities to prepare students to do that work, knowing that 5 years ago, it was, talking to high schoolers, if you want a good job, you want to think about the future, get into coding, learn how to code. Coding will be this sort of like, workforce proof issue, skill set that will just leverage you for all this future success. And that's like so not the thing anymore. Right. AI is able to do so much of that. And so thinking like, what is Pennsylvania's higher ed strategy around AI is something I think would be a strategy worth pursuing in this group.
And the other thing I want to point out is we know that young people coming out of high school now are going to change careers, not just jobs, 5 to 7 times over the course of their lifetime. And every time they change a career, they need to upskill or get themselves credentialed. So part of what you're pointing out is the need to create a higher education infrastructure that's going to allow people to continue to retool and reskill or upskill as these changes occur, many of which we might not even be able to predict. I don't know that we could have predicted 10 years ago that AI was going to do what it did. And now we have people who may have been outmoded by it. What are we going to do for them? How are we going to make sure that our sector can help them take the next step to supporting their families or living the life that they want to live?
Yeah, and exactly on that topic, and our four-year institutions are geared more towards our graduating high schoolers, right? They're going from high school directly into a four-year institution, and you get that nice swath of time, and they continue their education there. Where community colleges are, like, again, that missing asset. Like the people that are going to community colleges are potentially high school graduates, but working adults, veterans, people changing careers, recovering addicts, single parents. Those are a justice system involved, like people that aren't necessarily the optimal student demographic for our four-year higher education institutions. And those are also the people that are outside the workforce at this moment, right? And so how do we engage them and get them into the workforce? I always joke, just leaning into your data that you have there as well. We have Bucknell University and Susquehanna University within 10 minutes of where I live, which are phenomenal, love them. And yet we have this huge 2-year and certification gap in our area. So time they graduate a plumber or electrician, hats off to them, but I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
Thank you. Any other comments in the room? Right here. A representative of the Penn State University.
Hi, my name is Vivian Zangari, and I work here at Penn State in Student Affairs. This kind of ropes in the past couple goals, but I'm wondering if there has been any talk of providing some sort of incentive for Pennsylvanian students to remain in Pennsylvania for their education and then work X amount of years in Pennsylvania, as a lot of Pennsylvanians are seeking higher education in states that have lower tuition for out-of-state students. And then a lot of Pennsylvanians who are educated in Pennsylvania are now leaving the Commonwealth for employment for various reasons. So just wondering if have been talks of any incentivization.
Well, I know that the General Assembly is deeply engaged in this issue because I've had lots of conversations with legislators about this very issue. And there are policies, new scholarship policies in place that would target dollars towards high need, credentials that would fill high need occupations, but would also require students to stay in Pennsylvania. So there is movement in that direction. So my question to you is, what would your recommended strategy be to do more of that? Like what, or do you have something more specific that you think would get us to where you're trying to go?
Sure. Targeting the Pennsylvania students who may be fearing not seeking education because of the cost. And so saying that if they go for either a certificate or even a 2-year degree, not forcing it to be a bachelor's. If you earn that degree and then work in Pennsylvania for, let's say, 5 years, using that degree or certification, then they have some sort of grant that they receive or a percentage of the cost that they incurred from either out of pocket or through a loan, having part of that forgiven or granted back.
Understood. Thank you. That's really concrete, and it is stuff that we've been talking about. There's this Grow PA scholarship program right now that does some of that. It's probably too little money to cover the entire state, but it's the same idea as what you're talking about. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, awesome.
To piggyback on that strategy, something that we talk a lot about in our agency is connecting student to employers while they're in school through
GCED?
Yep. Through internship programs, through job shadowing, through some kind of connection in that regard. So in the budget, we're requesting $2 million for a Career Connect program, again, to encourage that internship opportunity, having employers offer that, because once students have that connection and they're working in a place, they're more likely to stay. So again, it is to develop that connection so that, again, that they, we stay. So hopefully, people don't leave and they have exciting industry and opportunities here, which is what we're, trying to do as well through the 10-year economic development plan.
Thank you. I think there was one more. Yep.
So on the one slide, you showed the need for certificates and associate degrees being the largest need in
the central part of
the central pencil.
Yeah.
So the stackable credentials are really a way to start moving people through that.
We talk about stackable credentials a lot. We have been, because for people who don't use that language, it's basically creating pathways for students to obtain pieces of post-secondary education and have them count towards the next piece along the way, so that people can enter or exit post-secondary education as they can and as they need, given all the other things they probably have on their plate.
So board member Andrea Shirk has a comment, and member Shirk, you should be able to come on camera if you would like, and certainly off mute.
Hi, good afternoon. When I hear all this, there's certainly, I heard some great strategies around what employers can do in terms of, potentially trying to put some funds towards students' education or create time. Certainly, the education systems, I think, are looking at this data and, trying to adjust the programming. But until the actual parents and students understand the gaps and which are then opportunities, it feels like we would be missing a critical piece. We can have a ton of nursing programs, but if students aren't entering that, it would be really interesting as a strategy to think about how are we marketing to parents and students as they're making their choices about the vast amount of opportunities ahead, helping them understand, hey, actually an associate's degree, which is less investment, leads to more of the job openings at these higher paid, potential prices. So I think we have to also think about, and maybe something that we can do, because it's not tied to any specific school, but at a Pennsylvania level, is how are we marketing to students and parents about what opportunities exist ahead in Pennsylvania?
Thank you for that, Andrea. That's a concrete strategy that states that are best in class do really well. So there's lots of places we can learn from in terms of how to make information more accessible to students and families, many of whom, are trying to navigate a really complex system. Anybody else? No? We're moving up. Okay, get up there, Lubna. No, they can't hear you unless you're on mic. Yeah.
This is to build off of what you were saying. So most students, I would guess, first learn about jobs from their family, their friends, parents, whoever they know in the neighborhood and whatever those folks do. So this idea of promotion and outreach and recruitment from industry is really critical. And there are tools and there are ways to do that that we need to make sure post-secondary education is a part of and a part of those conversations, because we can all learn from it. And I won't repeat the kind of things that I was talking about earlier, but there are connections between industry, post-secondary, secondary, and thereon, and the workforce system and economic development. So we just need to make sure that we are connecting each other to those opportunities.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to goal 5. We're rounding the corner here. There we go. Ensure accountability and efficient use of state funds. This is an explicit goal that was embedded in the legislation that created the State Board of Higher Education. But there's lots of different ways to interpret this language. When we think about it, we think about finding ways to track and make more transparent lots of different things about the post-secondary sector, coming up with policy recommendations that might align with more efficient use of funds, and incentivizing institutions to coordinate and work together. So just to be clear, the State Board of Higher Education has no authority to do that with institutions, but what we do have is the ability to come up with strong ideas and then create the support and the capacity that the sector might need in order for different institutions or different institutions in a region or whatever that might be to kind of work together. So just a few data points for you all to know. So a lot of this has to do with information data, right? So colleges and universities collect a lot of wonderful, wonderful data. But are among the most decentralized secondary, that means is there's no central repository and there's no way for people to be able to see consistently across institutions or sectors what that data might be able to tell them. We don't have a mechanism for showing return on investment. There's lots of different ways to do that. Different states do it different ways. We don't do that right now. Might be something that might be nice. You know, our sector gets criticized for not providing a good enough return on investment. Is that actually true? Data will tell us that, and we can create ways to show, you know, taxpayers how our sector is doing on that. There's lots of different sources of data, but different institutions and different sectors might define things differently. So then you can't, it's like comparing apples and oranges. It's really hard to understand a whole sector. You might be able to understand maybe the PASHA universities because they collect data in unified ways, but no other sector in the state really does. So that's a problem if what we're interested in is transparency for the public. And our institutions submit a lot of data to national data systems, which, by the way, are now under threat. So we don't know if they're going to continue to exist. But again, they don't talk to each other. And so we have lots of different pieces of information in different formats in different ways, but we don't have a unified way of understanding our sector and helping people understand that the public resources that we spend in higher education are actually used well. So that's what I have. Those are sort of the things to think about as we think about this goal. And I'm very curious to hear if you've got any suggested strategies for how to ensure accountability, which sounds punitive. It's really just about transparency and making sure that everybody understands that our resources are being used well. They're getting a good return on investment for the students, but also for the Commonwealth. When we invest dollars in higher education, how's that paying off for the Commonwealth in terms of increased, income tax because people are making higher wages? Those kinds of things that other states do well, not every other state, but several, that we could learn from. What are some of the strategies we might use in Pennsylvania to kind of address this issue? High school counselor?
You kind of already alluded to this, but I think common vocabulary around what we mean with these issues would be helpful. So much of the data that is available to me as a school counselor is, well, this is what the graduation rate is at that college. But like, what does that mean? You know, does that mean that those students go off and get a job? What does it mean? And it's not that I can't dig into data sets and learn this many students earn degrees in pre-med at this college, and okay, what was their average like MCAT score? Like I can do that. That's a time-intensive process. But even that is just me saying, well, if I'm trying to come up with a way to define if that college is doing what it's supposed to do for what you're looking to do, it's difficult. So if there would be a way to create some common vocabulary around, success beyond just a degree attainment, that would be really helpful.
So you're talking about employment indicators of some sort, or wage indicators?
Which I know are really complicated things, because in K-12 we try to do that too. Like, well, other than go to college, like, or military, how do you really like measure that? But trying to be creative around what are like outcomes that might demonstrate success beyond just, and different institutions do that already in a lot of ways on an institutional basis. They'll talk about alumni outcomes and all that. But again, it's not like, oh, click button, there it is. It's often now I have to become an expert in that local institution, which there are hundreds of them across Pennsylvania. So for me, as someone who's providing a lot of that guidance and support to families and students, it's difficult unless I know, okay, you're specifically interested in Penn State. Let me explain what Penn State specifically does when the language at Penn State looks different than Pitt or Susquehanna University or Shippensburg. So common vocabulary, I think, would be a helpful way to improve at least the understanding of accountability.
Thank you for that.
As someone who's not sure how funding is directed to universities, is it tied back to education rates, graduation rates, and employment potential within the Commonwealth, and incentives for positions that get hired in Pennsylvania?
Direct appropriations are not tied to those metrics. There is what's called a performance-based funding council that's working to create those linkages just for Pitt, Penn State, and Temple. And they're currently doing that work to try to figure that out. But by and large, no, we don't know how those dollars are connected to specific outcomes that the state might have an interest in, like filling major, workforce gaps, or ensuring that people are graduating with less debt. We don't have that kind of information. So my question to you is that what you're asking for? Got you. Okay. Any other feedback in the room?
So measuring the accountability and ultimately the ROI, there are, I know you know about like Lightcast or MZ, these organizations that, and you've done some of this yourself, that have formulas that they utilize in order to determine what the return on investment is. The community colleges do have a voluntary framework of accountability through the American Association of Community Colleges, because typically the accountability on those can be different than a 4-year university. So just a couple thoughts there about, maybe how, because the important thing is tracking all the way through gainful employment. And that's how those the wages and ultimately the building the tax base.
Thank you. And I think you're also pointing to maybe a suggestion that we take a look at what already exists and what tools we might utilize instead of reinventing the wheel.
And can I also jump in? Some of that might also be applicable to 4-year institutions as well.
Right, exactly. So
I too am not familiar with the funding process and how things go. And this was brought up to me last week by an organization who had heard superintendents talking that they are not encouraging their students to go to their career and technical school because the school itself, the high school, loses out on funding. And in hearing that, the organization who works with individuals who most likely are not going to be going to college, but they are getting that technical education and are better suited for that, was very surprised about it. So I would just then encourage, if that is the case, if there could be changes in that funding, because as we do need more individuals with those technical skills, we want to be encouraging those pathways. And if the institutions are not, because it comes down to dollars, that's not in the best interest of the students and ultimately everyone.
Yeah, I can't speak to the degree to which that's accurate, but I think what you're pointing to is, can we align our educational systems so that we're not creating unintended consequences or incentives that might interrupt the, the need for people to get credentials that are, in an affordable way that might be aligned to their job aspirations.
Ironically, the systems for collecting, storing, analyzing, and disseminating data are expensive and require a lot of technical expertise. So a strategy to me would be to find a way across the Commonwealth to support that work.
Thank you. Are we good? Is there any? Okay, we're going to go to our last goal now. And I appreciate, like, we're on time. It's crazy. The last goal has to do with strengthening the fiscal health and stability of our higher education sector. The board is actually charged with helping with this, not to force itself into higher ed institutions that might be exhibiting signs of fiscal instability, but to provide tools and capacity for institutions that might be seeking that kind of assistance. As is true in the country, Pennsylvania higher education institutions are under enormous fiscal duress. One of the things we keep hearing about is, major cuts to research funding for major research universities such as Penn or other places. But in reality, even though that makes the headline, our higher education institutions across the Commonwealth, large and small, are struggling in ways that they may not have been struggling 10 years ago. And I just want to give you some data that the Department of Education has collected that's really important for us to understand. So what I have here are the number of closures and mergers between 2022 and 2025 by the degree granting institutions, that's community colleges, state universities, et cetera, and then our private licensed schools, which provide sub-degree post-secondary training. And you see between 2022 and 2025, we had a lot of private licensed schools close. Those are real students paying real money to go to those schools, and they've been closing. We had 8 of those between 2022 and 2025. There are more planned. So in the best case scenario, when an institution is going to close, we know about it. We had an institution last year called University of the Arts where we did not know it was closing, and it was a major disaster for the city of Philadelphia. So we always want to know when an institution has decided it's going to close, but we have another 4 in the degree granting space and another 6 in private license schools that are coming up, that we know are coming up. Then there's this whole question of active consideration of closures, and there's up to 12 that we know about, and I'm speaking now specifically about the Penn State branch campuses. President Bendapudi made a public announcement that there are 12 branch campuses that are under consideration for closure. She says that not all of them will close, but some of them will close. So that's a big deal. And then there's another set of institutions that are exhibiting public signs of fiscal distress. And this information is collected by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. So every time we hear that, an institution has had massive layoffs, or an institution, there's a vote of no confidence against a president because of fiscal issues, like those kinds of things, or we hear from regional accreditors that an institution is under duress, we collect that information. So there's 12 degree granting institutions and 7 private license schools that are currently exhibiting these signs. Does that mean they're all going to close? No, but it means it's a red flag we need to look at. So we have a set of higher education institutions in the Commonwealth. Many of them are exhibiting these signs. And sometimes institutions have to close. But every time an institution closes, it hurts a community. And, it reduces sometimes access to post-secondary education. And so we have an interest in supporting our higher ed institutions if they can stay open, and providing them with that kind of support. But if they cannot stay open and they must merge or they must close, we have an interest in protecting the students that attend those institutions. And so this is a large and growing concern. And it's being exacerbated potentially by things that are happening in the federal government, particularly with regard to access to financial aid. Because most of our higher ed institutions are what we call tuition driven, which means the majority of their revenue is coming from tuition. So if students if we see these dropping demographics that I showed you earlier, and then on top of that, you see that there's problems with Pell Grants or student loans, you could see a continued dramatic drop in enrollment, which means more institutions are going to be at risk. So this is this is a major issue that the State Board of Higher Education wants us to take a look at and see what we can do. Several years ago, we were 49th out of 50 states in terms of the total amount of state appropriations that Pennsylvania provided to higher education. And the total amount includes both financial aid and direct state appropriations. We're now at 40th. Great news, we're still in the basement, but not quite second to last. But, the level of money that we spend on higher education, even though it might seem enormous compared to other states, when we look at it per capita, per person that lives in the state, we're still bringing up the rear. And that has implications for the capacity of our higher ed institutions as well. It also has implications in terms of affordability. So I'm gonna end here with this particular goal. Some of you may have really strong feelings about this because you might be at an institution that could be struggling with enrollment or those kinds of things. Do you have some strategies for us to consider in thinking about how to strengthen this sector? Did you raise your hand? Yes, right here.
Thank you. My name is Hank Baylor, and I'm with Lanier and Megan back here with the community college effort that's been going on for 15 years now. And we're very close. And unfortunately, we weren't here earlier because of construction on 45. So I apologize for that.
Oh, okay.
All right, it was big construction. So you probably already talked about this, but the time I've been here, we've been dancing around the real issue as far as I'm concerned. And that is money. It's a zero-sum game. And the big guys dig into the pot first. And I hope I don't alienate anyone here, but that's a fact of life. The state colleges get their money, and the 2-year colleges get their money, and the community colleges are forced to have to find the money elsewhere, and that's the problem we have. Our county commissioners in all 4 counties refuse to raise taxes. Just flat refuse to say it. It's a dirty word. It's only 3 letters, and it's still a dirty word. We just can't get them to move, and they're all 3 county commissioner counties, which is unbelievable. We just need 2 in each county to agree. So where do we go? And we go to businesses. Well, I went to Watsontown Trucking. They have 500 trucks. They started their own diesel school in West Virginia. And all the companies around us, welding companies like Pickrite and so on, are doing the same thing. Are you all familiar with Triangle Tech?
Mm-hmm.
Triangle Tech has 5 facilities in the state. They just closed all 5. It takes a student $30,000 for 18 months to get a welding certificate from Triangle Tech. They can't afford to do that, and especially when you're in the desert in central Pennsylvania. We have to travel 30, 40 miles for our kids in Lewisburg to go to Hack or go to Penn College. And even when they do that, it's $36,000 a year. That's incredible. They got to drive, and they can't have a job. So we need to be able to have a funding source that doesn't require the 1/3, a 1/3, and a 1/3. If you want to know what to do, dig into that zero-sum game, because there's only a certain amount of money, and you wonder why we're 40th. It's because we don't invest in secondary education that's affordable and close to where the students are. Brain drain in our region is incredible. They leave. They go to Penn State, they stay there, or go someplace else. They don't come back to Lewisburg or Sunbury or Northumberland. So if there's anything you can do, is to try to look at the funding process and not put the burden on the taxpayer locally, who doesn't want to pay $1.15 a month for education.
So I hear 2 potential strategies coming out of what you said. The first is to look at how community colleges in particular are financed. And the second is to look at how high higher education state appropriations are distributed across sectors.
Yeah.
So one of the
Yeah,
potential.
we don't have a casino. We don't have giant market. We don't have all these people that could contribute.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we hope that this new strategic plan is going to do is to help us think about, and by us, I mean taxpayers, a governor's office, the General Assembly, where should we prioritize our funding and how can we use our funding most effectively to meet the goals that will be included in the strategic plan. So I think your suggestion about looking at funding and resources is really salient. And I also think that the strategic plan itself is going to help people sort through different strategies and point towards a funding strategy that's going to have the most benefit for the Commonwealth.
And you're welcome to put me on the committee if you'd like.
Okay.
Thank you.
Livna, there's a couple questions over here, and I'm conscious of the time. We have 4 minutes left for this hearing. So I want to make sure if you could keep your suggestions short and to the point, I would appreciate it.
When you're a struggling institution financially, first, it's really difficult to raise your hand and alert everyone that you're struggling. And so when you do that, there's not a lot of resources. Everyone is very supportive, but you are met with tons of reports that you have to fill out. And I don't mean minimal, I mean 300 pages, right? And I have great relationships with our accreditors and the people that we work with, but there's not a lot of here's what you should do in this situation. It's what are you going to do if this happens? And what are you going to do if that happens? And how are you going to be responsible? And so then you're spending the next month, because you usually have 30 to 90 days to get all of these reports in, and it's onerous on the institution and it's tough. And I will tell you, we go to our conferences for our creditors, and there's panels on all these great innovative things you can do, but not a lot of panels on what do you do if you're in danger of closing. And so I think there has to be something that comes out of this for institutions that are just getting by, because there's a lot of us that are just on this fine line getting by. We're not in a deep plunge, but it is harder every day.
Yeah.
To have, even when we can get with other institutions that are struggling, to talk about how do we turn this around, or who is even interested in a merger or an acquisition? Because that's another tough conversation, to just go to all of your competitors and say, are you interested in partnering? So having some sort of way that we can collaborate with other institutions to help turn it around, or if you have to close gracefully and not with your head down.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just a couple more comments.
This is in direct response to that. So one of the things, to your point, is what do you do? Who guides you along the way? One of the things that we are trying to focus on, and as the school, as an employer, is providing layoff aversion strategies. And then if you do end up closing, how do you get those educators and other individuals in the institution reemployed? And so if there's a mechanism by which you know that there are institutions that are in danger of those things, communicating that to labor and industry is helpful for us, so that we can deploy some of those layoff aversion strategies and things like that.
Thank you.
And as an area that has Penn State Du Bois, which is one of the campuses being considered for closing, I think it's important to understand that we've created healthcare deserts in rural America. Now we've created educational deserts for rural communities that cannot now afford to get education. They can't drive 2 hours to Penn State, Maine. There's no other universities to do that. There's not the community college network. So what do you do for these kids? Create a rural stabilization account where a portion of the money from Penn State, Maine has to go to these rural campuses that form Launchbox, that's partnered with healthcare to drive the economics of those rural communities. Otherwise, just close us down, because you're already taking all the land and taxing in lieu of land. So you can't raise taxes on trees because they're owned by state agencies, federal government. There's no revenue to come in. So it's not a simple, well, just raise your taxes when you have to tax the Commonwealth to do so.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap it up here. I want to say a couple things. First of all, I really appreciate your honest feedback, and I want to note something that you may or may not have noticed, which is that we have people from many different sectors here in this room and on this call contributing, and that is by design, because we have to break down the silos that exist between our sector and we have to listen to different kinds of voices. And so you really have helped us to do that. And we are recording everything you say. We're identifying major themes. But if you want to say more and you didn't get a chance, we have a survey, and there's a QR code on this PowerPoint deck, and it's also on our website. And you can take that survey, and it's really focused in the same way that this conversation has been. Here's our 6 goals. Give us some strategies for each one of those 6 goals. But I want to make sure that you know that that's an opportunity. And for anybody you know that couldn't come and wants to contribute their ideas, we can do that. They should do that, and we will take it seriously. At the end of the stakeholder engagement process, there will be a report that identifies major themes from all of our stakeholders. So I want you to know that this is not pro forma. We set the goals. We need to know how to get to the goals, and you are helping us do that. So with that, I want to thank every single person who participated. This has been a great couple hours. You've come up with terrific ideas, and we're going to continue to collect those ideas and continue to engage. So thank you, everybody, so much. And with that, I believe we are adjourned, or Cindy has to
I have
adjourn
to
us.
officially.
Okay, Cindy's adjourning.
Got to be official. But let me add my thanks, and just on behalf of the entire state board, and just to note, the next full meeting of the board will be next week on March 27th at Luzerne County Community College. Agenda materials will follow, and we will be having a similar session. So thank you all very, very much. And the meeting is adjourned.